Welcome to the Karmic Mirror podcast, brought to you by Fifth Line Studios. In this space, we unravel the profound wisdom tucked within the folds of the self-help world and present it to you in a way that resonates with the heart of the collective.
Our mission is to seamlessly bridge the gap between esoteric knowledge and practical tools for everyday life. Whether you're a seasoned seeker or just beginning your path, join us and uncover the magic within and around you. Tune in and let the journey begin.
Hello, Karmic Mirror listeners. Allie here. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, everyone.
On the heels of our North Node in Pisces episode, we are going to be now diving deeper into the theme of the South Node. Now, we touched a little bit on that relationship between the North Node and the South Node in our previous episode. So we're not going to go as deep in that relationship with those today, but definitely listen back to our first episode on the North Nodes if you want to hear more in depth about like the North Node and the South Node and the relationship between those. However, today we're going to be diving into the South Node Solar Eclipse in Libra specifically, which happens on October 2nd. And Michelle, highlight, what do we know about eclipses? Why do we pay attention to eclipses and what do we know about them?
Sure. So eclipses really signify change and transformation. And an eclipse itself happens when the moon's path crosses the lunar nodes and aligns with the sun and the earth. And that means that when we have a new moon, that turns it into a solar eclipse. And when we have a full moon, it's a lunar eclipse, which is what happened on September 17th. And so it's the alignment with the nodes that makes the eclipses super unique, super powerful.
And then specifically about the South Node, what do we know about the South Node? We talked a little bit yesterday about that's really the karma that you're bringing into this lifetime is the most concise way I tend to think about it, the tail of the dragon. What else is significant for us to talk about when it comes to the South Node?
Sure. So we mentioned in our North Node episode the symbols and the archetypes of the nodes. So the symbols are going to look like a horseshoe, and the South Node is going to be a horseshoe that's like an upside down horseshoe. And this represents this particular point in our natal charts. The North and South nodes are kind of like our karmic destiny and our spiritual growth. So if you think about the North Node, like you talked about the tail of the dragon, so the North Node being the head of the dragon, because we're reaching towards this point, it's our soul's purpose. It's our soul's mission, and it's this point that we're always striving towards in this lifetime, whereas the South Node is the tail of the dragon, and you can think about their relationship together as if the South Node represents your karmic past, your inherited patterns, whether you want to believe that they're inherited patterns from your youth, your upbringing, from your parents, your grandparents, your lineage, and also from your past lives, then you can think about how they work together in this particular lifetime to help you grow, right? We're always reaching for this insatiable point, the head of the dragon, the North Node, and we're using what we know about the South Node, our comfort zone, the gifts, the talents we come to this life with to help us reach that point. Also, you can consider the South Node as kind of some astrologers, and I know I mentioned this in the past, but Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, he, the Swiss psycho.
Oh, you sweet psycho.
He talked about the South Node representing our shadow. And so if you think about that relationship of, oftentimes our shadow is our comfort zone, sometimes because it's what we know, it's the things, the patterns, the habits we've inherited. And when you talk about finding real gold in the shadow, it's a lot about, or I think I said triggers are buried treasure sometime ago. And, when we alchemize those lessons, when we take our shadow experiences or habits or patterns or beliefs, and we start to learn from them, we start to heal, that oftentimes that's what's going to help us. Those are going to be gifts or things we can turn into, um, things that will help us propel us forward.
And here's the cool thing about astrology as a system and why it's such a helpful modality is because reading my South Node and diving deeper into that, and this certainly isn't my first time I've done that, it really highlights all of this quote unquote work I've done in therapy and life coaching and just
Yeah.
conversations, to be magnetic. Where are my blocks? Where is my programming? And it's all tied up in there in that South Node. It's like, yeah, you did come. You were really good at doing XYZ. However, it's just continues to be very ahaing for me to just
Mhm.
and validating. And we'll get into our specific South Nodes a little bit later. However, I just always want to praise this system because while it's intricate and can be very confusing, even just looking at the South Node, I was like, oh, yeah, I was brought into this world and can do that really, really well. How have I
Mhm.
been leaning into that too much? How has it not been serving me? How has it been serving me? All those areas. So I found that really interesting, intriguing, helpful, validating, all of the things. And like a lot of things with astrology, it's just like click. Oh, yeah, that makes really a lot of sense about me. I don't know how you feel about yours, but
No,
that's what.
that's so true. Like, how do we understand ourselves better? Astrology is the language of the stars. So, how do we give ourselves the language to explain things that we probably already know to be true about ourselves, or to shed light on things that maybe are repressed? And thinking about the South Node, um, a lot of astrologers may consider it to be, well, one, there's a lot of conversation around the nodes between karma and reincarnation. And you don't have to believe in reincarnation to understand the nodes and their influence. So if you think about the South Node being maybe it's your unfinished business, or it's challenges that we didn't quite learn from or overcome, whether that's in our upbringing or our past lives, if that's your belief, then that gives us the opportunity to identify, like, where do we still have room to grow for our own personal evolution. And so, like, what are these hidden potentials? What are these hidden gifts or talents that we have that can help us in this lifetime reach for that thing we're moving towards? So I think that's really cool. The other thing I learned recently about South Nodes that I actually don't think I knew before we were doing research for this episode was that the South Node, or a lot of astrologers will say that the potential, the positive potential. So, when we talk about finding that gold, learning the lessons, and alchemizing it, a lot of astrologers will tell us that the positive potential of the South Node, those qualities, really don't become accessible, or we don't become fully or more aware of them until we start that first, we enter our first Saturn return, which comes in, around 28 ish, roughly 28, 29. That first Saturn return is when we start to become aware of the South Node, which makes a lot of sense, right? Like 29, 30, like as you're going, transitioning into your 30s, of course, we know there's so much within Saturn return, which is, we can do a whole episode, although it was a little while. It was a few years ago it was almost a decade ago now.
Like yesterday for me.
um, but, um,
Girl, we on our Neptune return now.
yeah. Yeah, we're close. We're inching towards the second Saturn. No, but that's really fascinating, right? Because you think about all of the things that start to come to light as you're getting into your 30s. And so it does make sense because you're starting to think about these maybe negative, what we view as negative or shadow aspects of ourselves that we're like, hey, this isn't really working for me. This part of myself. I think around that time is when I started to notice, yeah, like certain qualities that I was like, you know what? Like, I think these parts of my personality, of myself, like, they're not who I see in my future. And maybe they can be left in this decade of my 20s, and that's okay. But so that's something I learned.
That's really
And
interesting.
yeah.
I hadn't heard that. And what came up for me is Gosh, I wish I would have known that. I think I could have made a lot of different decisions. I think specifically professionally for me, we'll get into the more nuanced of our specific charts, but my South Node being in Capricorn, a lot of work decisions I think I might have thought through a little bit differently had I had known that my South Node was in Capricorn because it shows up a lot. But that's interesting. I didn't know that. And again, just these modalities, how they, I'm not going to be bitter because they didn't help me in my late 20s, early
Well, you're
30s.
meant to find out when you're meant to find out, right? Like when you're
Exactly.
ready for change
Mm,
and or ready to I think when you're ready to acknowledge those parts about yourself, right? Like in my 20s, yeah, all of the, those shadow aspects, I'm sorry, they weren't shadow. They were like me living it up in that lower frequency. And not always. I mean, I wasn't a horrible person, but it was almost like, yeah, I could be in a little bit of delusion about it because I could be, because that was my 20s and I was living life in that way. And there's nothing wrong with it. And also, I probably wouldn't have noticed it from, if it was staring me in the face. And
and you
so,
do a really beautiful job of reframing, even just in this conversation. And I think like I just know the space energetically that I'm in. So I tend to go to just the like, how can I fix the thing? How can I do the thing here?
mhm,
And also realizing that your South Node comes with a lot of beauty. It's a lot of times our opportunities, I learned this in a leadership course, like 80% of our opportunities are based on an overuse of our strengths. And so
mhm.
I,
Yeah.
I think about that as the South Node also. So I love your reframes because I was thinking to myself, like, it's not always about blocks and shadows. Of course it is, but it's also a beautiful opportunity to grow and evolve.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and if we're talking about unfinished business or mistakes we didn't learn from, it's like how many people learn, from their mistakes the first time around? I don't know. I don't know the statistics, but I would guess it's probably not very high. Sometimes that's why we call them patterns. That's why they're habits. And, leaving reincarnation off the table just in this lifetime alone. It's like, how many times do I need to learn the same storyline or repeat the same narrative over and over till I get it? Till I'm like, oh, and then even when you get it, you're like, okay, well, now I need to learn how to embody this different version of how I'm showing up. And that could take a long time. So, anyway, so all that to say, when we talk about the South Node, this is what's pointing towards your soul's journey because it's going to show you the lessons and the experiences of your soul that have come with you into this lifetime to help you grow. It's all about our evolution, like our spiritual evolution, and whether that's in one lifetime or whether that's in multiple lifetimes, the South Node is here to show us like what are the lessons, where do we have opportunities, what's our comfort zone that we came in here, our overuse skills, as you
Mhm.
said, like what's the comfort zone that when we stay in too long, we're not moving anywhere, we're staying stagnant. And so that part is really important to point out. And so the link between the two, I thought this was a beautiful explanation to look at it. I heard this recently on a podcast and like from an astrologer from years ago, I think. But she says, when we understand the link of the North and the South node, it's a cause and effect. And so that link between our soul's purpose and the lessons that we bring in to further our purpose or that we come bearing in this lifetime, it creates a karmic pattern. And that story of your karmic pattern is told to you through your natal chart. And I think that is so cool because you could spend an entire lifetime learning these things.
And is
So
that
that's the
the
South Node.
yeah, in hindsight, we were talking before this episode, in hindsight from our North Node, is that covering what you were thinking about of like your birth nodes never change?
Mm.
Or should we highlight that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think so too. Because in the last episode, we talked a lot about the North Node. We talked about the eclipse that was happening on the 17th, and we're going to talk about the October 2nd eclipse. But I think it's really important to just continue to reiterate this point that the nodes, the North and South nodes, like any planet, are always moving. And so they move through the sky, and thus they move through your own personal natal chart. And so if you think about when we talk about this eclipse happening in Libra, right? That's the example of the nodes moving through our natal chart. They're moving in the sky and they're moving through everyone's natal chart different uniquely. And when that happens, they're awakening different possibilities, different parts throughout our chart because it's transiting, right? So, like now we have this eclipse happening in Libra that's moving through our charts through the point of Libra, where Libra lands in our lives, and awakening that particular area. And this happens every 18.5 years that the nodes move. And then the distinction happens when we talk about our personal natal chart placements. So the signs and the positions of your nodes, your birth nodes, which we talked about in the last episode. So that is different from where it is in Libra and eclipse season right now.
So
It's
as an example, you maybe for yours, so your nodes are
Well, mine are in Aries and in Libra. So
in Libra.
those are my birth nodes. That's in my personal natal chart. And that's what we talked about when you pull up your natal chart. Where are the horseshoes? That's your personal placement. And so those never change. That never changes. And that's the most important thing to know because that's what's going to help you understand yourself better. The placement or the transiting nodes, that's going to help you understand how you interact in the world better, how to use your free will to then guide you with what's happening around you.
So that's when we're looking for Libra in our charts.
Yeah, we're talking about eclipse season right now. Yeah.
I think that's really helpful and clarifying because I know a lot of times I'll ask the questions and just trying to learn, and there's so many nuances to it, and I like that differentiation between it. So it's helpful.
Yeah, you can think like collectively, the nodes are going to change every 18.5 years. In my personal chart, my personal nodal placements are never going to change. And that is what I'm going to learn about myself from. Learn about my soul's purpose, learn about what gifts I came into this life with. And yeah. So let's talk about the eclipse, right? I think we talked a lot about the South Node and what that means. And honestly, I really encourage people like it's a longer conversation. You can spend your entire life learning your nodes. You can spend your entire life unraveling your birth chart and maybe never even get to all of it because that's just how incredibly magical and infinite we
They're so
are.
intricate, and it's also like, do you just want to know your natal chart, or do you want to interact with it given what's going on currently? There's just so many different ways to look at your chart as well. So
Yeah, and I really encourage people to go look it up if you're feeling so called. It has been a few years for me of just like hearing from different experts, different astrologers on what my personal nodal placements mean and not only that, but then looking at how does that actually show up for me in my life, looking at past examples, experiences so that I can further kind of understand my story and so all that aside, we do have an eclipse coming up on October 2nd. And the eclipse is a solar eclipse, which is a new moon. And it's happening in the sign of Libra. And so this is October 2nd. And, some of the basics, time to reflect. We said this on the last one, but it's eclipse season. We're going to say it again rest and reflect and ground yourself. Like that is I think that's the message of eclipses in general, but it is a time for reflection. It's a time to explore what are some of the patterns. And so when we talk about South Node themes, like what are those patterns that are maybe they reside in your comfort zone, maybe they aren't necessarily serving your spiritual growth, your soul's purpose, or where you're headed, your goals, all of the things. And what are those patterns? How might you want to begin releasing them? And then if we talk about Libra being a Libra eclipse in Libra, then we're talking about themes of Libra. So we know that Libra is all about the scales of justice and fairness. It's ruled by the planet Venus, which brings in the aspect of relationships, harmony, beauty. And so a South Node eclipse in Libra might highlight those areas where maybe if we're talking relationships, fairness, justice, balance, then where are we over relying on things like validation from others? Where are we avoiding the tough conversations or the conflict or the boundary setting in pursuit of just peace and keeping the peace, right? Like, where are we not letting ourselves have these real honest interactions in our relationships? And I always say this, like, you don't have to be in a relationship for this to apply. It could be your platonic relationships, it could be your working partnerships, it
Familial.
could be your relationship to
Mhm.
yourself. So just as a broad category, it's like, or as a broad, theme, this eclipse is a really great time to really reflect on your patterns in when it comes to justice and fairness and when it comes to your relationships.
Yeah. And I think when I looked on the Channy app, my Mars is in Libra in my second house. And I know we'll talk about the houses in just a minute, but it's a lot of that. And for me, it's you know how to make sacrifice your immediate needs when the situation calls for diplomacy, but the trick is knowing when to stick up for yourself. What lines won't you cross or allow to be crossed? Part of your work is coming to terms with the necessity of healthy conflict in life. So already I start thinking, and then the second house of being my Libra is in my second house of assets, resources, and livelihood. It's just interesting to start thinking through those things. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, just even being called to have this conversation and think through, okay, when that time comes, maybe I'll be presented with situations where I'm putting other people's needs before my own. And this is about really balancing those scales. And for me in my natal chart, it's no, you have to be aware to stick up for yourself and you have to balance because of where it lands in my chart, right? And certainly we can also, this isn't all natal things, but when I hear about like managing conflict health in a healthy way, right? Who as children raise your hands learns to handle conflict or looked at conflict as a good thing. Like no one, right?
Mhm.
You're in a room, like probably no one raises their hands. And so that I get interested about as well. Where does yours fall in your house? And how does that really does anything come up for you of like come October 2nd, what might be highlighted for you?
Well, the South Node for me is in my ninth house. It is in Libra. So my
Oh,
South
that's
Node's in
right.
Libra. It's in the ninth house. Ninth house represents higher education, travel, beliefs. So these are your philosophical views. It's so funny. We were just talking about
Before this call.
before we hit record, we were talking about, belief systems and views. And, I think one of the ways that this has shown up for me in terms of like maybe maybe not, maybe learning from the shadow aspects of this is to be really open minded and to be really kind of accepting and, steadfast in my own personal convictions without needing to. Um, and without needing to put them onto other people. So I think that's how it shows up a little bit. But let me just back up really quick because we were just talking about the South Node eclipse in Libra and what those overarching themes of, right? Libra and eclipse season, South Node, relationships, balance, justice, etc. But I think when we talk about how you can take the transit of this eclipse in Libra, the South Node eclipse, how you can personalize that to your own journey is to find it in
Mhm.
your chart. So, again, if you haven't, you can find your chart, you can get the Channy app, you can get, any of these natal chart places and you'll find your chart. Obviously, you're going to need some information for that, your birth location, date, and time. And when you find that horseshoe, that south node symbol or north node, if that's what you're looking for, but when you look at it, you're going to want to find what house number it falls in. And so that's what we're talking about. Mine is in the ninth house. And so there's two aspects that you can look at, right? You're going to look at where does Libra fall for you in your personal chart because that's the eclipse happening in Libra. So how is this personalized for you? Where does Libra fall in your chart? And then you're going to look at the number house it's in because that's going to point towards the area of your life that might be impacted by this eclipse So it tells me the area of your life for you to really reflect on.
So that for me, like second house, house of assets, resources, and livelihood. So that's what's on my radar, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Because Libra's in my second house.
exactly. So for you during the eclipse, you're like, okay, I know Libra falls in my second house. Well, where am I? Maybe what are some of the past patterns, or what are these finance or money related habits or patterns are maybe pulling me out of balance? Or maybe are the comfort zone that aren't necessarily helping me strive towards more balance or fairness or harmony or where I'm headed, i.e. North Node, right?
Yeah.
And so, or what I need to release, South Node. Like, what am I here? What patterns, what ideas, what beliefs am I ready to maybe loosen up and let go of during this eclipse?
Yeah. And I think the other thing to highlight, the cool thing about North nodes and South nodes is that, as we talked about in our North Node episode, is that you can find that. I mean, there's going to be some people who are like oddly nuanced in that like very cusp. And so you might actually need
Hmm.
the time you were born, but we are going to link a calendar. So if you don't know
Yeah.
the time you were born, or right, there's a lot of people who come across
Yeah.
that challenge. You can look at that chart, and most likely you're going to be able to see the time frame in which you were born, and it will highlight your north node and your south node on that. So that will be linked in our show notes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a great point. So, I did say pull up your birth chart, and please do if you want, but also you don't have to actually, because the nodal placements, like we said, they do change every 18 and a half months. So we will have, it's a little bit easier to identify where they land for you, but what you will need for your nodal for your your natal chart for
Yeah.
is to know what house number they fall in, because that's not going to tell you. So that's how you're going to understand a little bit more, another layer to it, right? But if you're looking strictly at the sign, it can give you a lot of information too. So, for example, if I didn't know my natal chart information and I didn't have that to point to what house, then at least I would know that my North Node is in Aries and my South Node is in Libra. And that can tell me a lot in itself, because the sign is going to point to the style or the approach. So, and we mentioned this before, but Aries, very action, ambitious, courageous, bold. That's the style, the approach to which I play out my soul's purpose. Whereas in South Node, the Libra, like, what am I bringing with me? The approach, the style, it's very Venusian. My comfort zone is to be in, deep Venusian Libra like qualities of ease and harmony in my daily life and beauty and aesthetics. And can that comfort zone hinder me from taking action, being bold, courageous? Yes, absolutely. When I'm living in that deep, deep seated comfort zone. Whereas if I were to take the lessons of that style and really apply it, then that points to a lot of what I love about living life. I like to be bold and dramatic, and maybe Aries aren't. No, Aries can be very dramatic, but I want to take action. I want to be independent and a leader, and I want to do it in the style that suits me, which is to look at beauty and excellence and aesthetics and harmony. And so, kind of marrying the two. So, I hope that sheds a little bit of light. But if you are looking through your natal chart and you're looking at the houses, um,
Yeah.
I mean, we can run through them really, really quickly, just in case you have it in front of you. I think it's really helpful. Like, first house, this is your rising sign. This is your house of yourself, your personality, your identity, your first impressions. And so if your South Node is in your first house, maybe you are looking at balancing right now during the eclipse, right? Balance Libra. Maybe you're looking to balance aspects of your self image with what your true authentic self is. Maybe there's an opportunity to find more balance there. And that's, I think, what comes up there is like that validation of seeking outside validation versus like learning to validate
Mhm.
yourself and find what works for you. Where's that balance? We talked a little bit about second house.
Yeah, which is where mine is. So I just want to share like a
Yeah.
aha that I have coming down the pipeline. So it's any past values or money related habits that need to shift for better balance.
Mm.
And I think what I have on my radar is there might be some potential opportunities professionally coming down the pipeline, and just always thinking about financially being compensated what is fair.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
for my tenure, and as a woman, and because we know in this, at least in our country, traditionally women are not paid as much as men. And so it's really neat for me to kind of think about that, of like, hey, and we'll circle back. That'll be fun too. Is like, I wonder if some of these opportunities are going to start to come up during eclipse season, which I know we're just supposed to relax and rest and not like manifest a shitload. But yeah, just thinking about that. And maybe that's like our practical tips section moving forward. But I think about that, and it's not like I'm going to go super controlled down of like, how can I ensure that this is all equal? But just even being in my mind of like knowing, hey, you got to stand in your fairness and your self-worth around that time is so beneficial.
Yeah.
So then third house, outdated
Yeah.
communication patterns, balance fair interactions with others.
Yeah. Your third house, communication, siblings, learning. Fourth house, home, family roots, right? So looking to what area of your life the house represents, and looking to the themes of Libra, like what do I need more balance? What do I need more fairness, justice, harmony in this area of my life? What patterns are maybe bringing me out of that place? I think is just an easy way to look at it. So, fifth house is self expression, creativity. Sixth house is all about your daily routine, your work life, your health, and your habits. So where, this sixth house brings up for me, I think back to our nervous system episodes. Where am I out of balance? Where can my habits, or even our micro habits episode that we just recorded recently? It's like, where can I let go of some of those habits that aren't supporting me in my health, my work life, my daily routine, to feel more in harmony? Seventh house, partnerships, marriage, relationships. So, yeah, seventh house, committed partnerships. Eighth house of transformation, intimacy, of shared resources. So, that's always a really fun and tricky one, especially in partnership. It's like, or business partners, right? Like, what are the stories that we have around intimacy? What are the stories that we have around sharing our resources with another person? And how do we, explore what more balance might look like there? What else? Ninth house of higher education, travel, beliefs. That's where my South Node lies. And I'll say, I'll come back to that, but 10th house, career, reputation, public image. 11th house, friends, social causes, aspirations. And 12th house is your subconscious. It's kind of like your hidden life, your spirituality, which is also ninth house of spirituality, I think, too. But when I think about the link between my north and south node being in Aries in my third house of communication, and South Node being in my ninth house of travel, philosophy, spirituality, and so on. What if I'm looking at the style and flair of the sign and the location? It's like, well, where in my life not where in my life, but how am I being called? How is this insatiable need for independence and for like confident self expression in the way that I communicate myself and my vision and my work? And how do I provide for myself? How do I learn to build that sense of independence for myself? And while also balancing this like comfort zone of like, if I think about past lives, like I'm coming with some, pretty maybe some deep convictions. And also, I think Venusian for me, what comes up is like being taken care of as a comfort zone when I think of not strictly just Libra, but I think about like that balance of power in relationships too. Like, how is my comfort zone to be like, for things to be taken care of for me versus my need to do it for myself. that's how I look at my personal placements. And that's always a constant theme in my life. I mean, I can think back if we think about South Node as being inherited patterns. Well, I can think of some quotes that have always stuck with me and not in the best way possible. But like my dad used to always say, every day is your birthday. I was really like, I wasn't super spoiled or anything, but it was like, you know, or things just, I think I'm a pretty good manifester
Mhm.
and I'm not a specific manifester. Things just happen. And I've always had this belief of like things are happening for me. And I've had it ingrained in me for a really long time since childhood. And I think when we talk about shadow aspects, how that has hindered my growth is relying on things happening for me versus the need, that deep core soul's need for me to make shit happen for myself,
Mhm.
for me to feel independent and free of my own ambition, my own courage, and my own independence. And balance that with the beauty and blessings of being, highly favored and blessed in this lifetime.
Mhm.
Um, so that's so those are some of the insights that have come up for the marriage between the two.
For your personal.
For my personal, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, because South Node is in Libra for me, and it is a South Node Libra eclipse, like there's going to be a little bit of overlap. And also, anyone who is born within that 18 and a half month period, I want to say, I'm going to pull it up right now.
Well, there's a lot. I actually was just looking at, like, my mom has the same as you and my dad, because I just got really interested about that Libra placement. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if Libra's in there somewhere for her, as I was thinking when we were talking. So
Yeah. Well, anyone, so I mean, again, like we said, it's 18 and a half year. I said 18 and a half years, 18 and a half
it was like
months.
my mom and dad fall into that bucket of that time frame of where they're
They do.
Libra and Aries as well.
So for anyone around my age, if you were born between April 7th, 1986 to December 2nd, 1987, then you would have your North Node in Aries and your South Node in Libra. And so, for you, yours is Cancer. So anyone born from September 25th, 1981 to March 16th, 1983, your North Node would be in Cancer and your South Node would be in, which is
Capricorn.
Capricorn. So it's fascinating because last episode we talked about those generational kind of collective themes, and then finding what house it lands in is how you're really going to understand your personal journey within the collective theme. And
Yeah.
so it's cool. It's really, really cool to dig into. I just like geek out over the nodes because, again, the layers of learning, right? Like I could put this down and not look at the nodes, or I could look at them all the time. And I guarantee 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, I'm going to have such deeper understanding and learning because it's just never ending. Again, we just don't reach this point where we get it and we know it all. Like once we get it, then something else is going to be revealed to us, or another, aspect of our shadow is going to get activated because we're just here to learn the lessons and we're here to like move ourselves forward in any way in our own timeline, our own ways, whether it's internally, externally, and whatnot.
So I've been like chomping at the bit because I was nervous about jumping out of order from what we talked about earlier. If I'm being honest, I was like waiting for you to talk about your personal placement, but there was a lot you were talking about earlier that I was just like, oh my gosh, I had so many ahas in here. So
I keep my notepad. So I'm like, let me write this to remember it.
yeah. So like following that journey of Capricorn being in my South Node, here's some of the things I've learned. Like
Mm,
Capricorn South Node people were taught that it is dangerous to reveal oneself emotionally. All right, that shows up in my life like very heavily. And
I gotta check.
yeah, check. And then also very, very much about prestige, recognition. You once worked really, really hard to earn merit, attain success, and be recognized. So the subconscious awareness is almost like you expect recognition, you expect authority, and you struggle to understand why that wouldn't just happen naturally. Almost
Mhm.
that inability to accept failure. Hello, 3 line in human design, right? I'm
Yeah.
literally here to try out all new things and fail and learn the best way to do it. And that really, like, there's a strong resistance to feeling inadequate and unsuccessful. And oftentimes, like, they can make themselves physically unwell before they'll be unsuccessful, which gets dangerous because what I'm running after, or what I was running after in life, is like, what is success as we define it as a society or as my community defines it? And that can get really dangerous. And the aha I had is that my past partner was a Capricorn sun. And I think maybe even a Capricorn rising, like there was a double Capricorn in that. And I just kept thinking back, there was a lot of energy around, I would feel as though he was very like, I need this prestige, I need this money, I need to be recognized. And I would oftentimes, like, a lot of that, like, butting heads, I would always come back to, at that point, and without even being aware of, like, and this is very Capricorn to me, South Node and Cancer North Node, is like, we started saying around the home, like, I would say, hey, like, some people are so poor, all they have is money. And there would always be these, like, conversations of, like, what is the success you're reaching for? Like, this feels pretty successful to me where we're at right now, given our past, our circumstances. And so that was really interesting to think about. And I know I talked about yesterday, almost like I feel like Cancer zodiac children signs have been put in my life. And it's almost to, like, guide me to the way of, like, where I'm supposed to be headed. And then thinking back to that time in my life when I was with my Capricorn partner, like, he's pushing and pushing and pushing for these things. And here I am on my karmic journey trying to, like, get rid of those things almost. Like, I don't need to be that person. I've learned how to be that person and do that thing. And now I'm evolving. And and that's not to say that person isn't evolving or anything like that, but it was just it was very interesting to make that connection. The other thing, you're smiling. What thoughts do you have on that?
I said they're not.
Okay.
I was voicing it to you on screen, and I was like,
listen,
I can say that.
But some of the things is like guilt. So they need to learn how to ask for help or ask for love despite the feeling of guilt that might come and go because of debt. And that in good relationships, debt isn't held against you. And it's not, like, evidence. So, like, debt, and that could very much be people lending you money, but it could also be them lending you time, their resources, whatever. You're just always feeling like you're in debt to people. And also, like, loneliness, this was, like, a key takeaway. Loneliness is not about who is around you. It's about whether you believe that you are loved or not. And that really resonated for me because, as I've been on my journey and just all the things that have happened, I think you and I talked. Remember, my best friend said to me, like, I love you unconditionally, right? Like, no matter what. And I was like, no, I don't. But that's not, like, offense to you. It's just like, and that's my journey right now. And so when I read that, it's like this weird thing because it's almost as though universe put this little treasure in front of me to say, yeah, like, let's continue to think about that thing of why you don't think you're unconditionally loved by anyone, right? And so that is just a lot of how my Capricorn South Node has started to come up. And there's a lot in there, but, like,
so much in there.
The guilt piece, making them blame themselves, like, blaming yourselves when you're less than perfect, trying to appease people inauthentically, and put yourself in situations that are not right for you because of that. And I just, like, think back and I'm like, yep, tick, 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 tick. And not, like, in a shameful way, but in a way of where I mentioned earlier, gosh, this would have been so helpful to know, which is why if any little child is, like, interested in any of this stuff, I'm like, come on, let's, like, learn about it, because I think it would be so helpful to grow up, like, knowing those things and how they show up.
100%. Well, that's the beauty of, like, I say this all the time, but I think about, and I won't go too far into this because it's a different conversation entirely, but oftentimes our parents come up, well, it's related, so I'll get to that. But oftentimes, you and I, we had parental conversations where we just spent an hour with our friend Janine and we just like talked about all the shit that we couldn't say. Right. And so we hold shame there. And that's why I was like, oh, it's just, we look at it as shame because that's just the first layer of what we feel when we think about our shadow or these experiences, because that's the instant reaction. That's the ego. That's the protectiveness of like, oh, this is shameful. Don't look at it. Don't go there. And then we talk about the South Node aspects being absolutely like having gold in them because once you can go beneath the first layers of feelings of shame and start to understand what's
Well, let me
really
pause.
in there, there's
Will you
so
remember?
much. But I want to go
Because I
back to
wanted to
something.
circle back to just the
Go ahead.
aha of noticing that my ex is a Capricorn. It's a beautiful thing because it's in those moments, it was the universe calling you, like these things that were important to him or that I perceived by behavior or words that were really important to him. It was kind of that shadowy element of
Hmm.
Capricorn of like, you got to get rid of that. And so it's not to, right, he's on his own journey. It's not to like hierarchy of anything, but it just is very interesting that, their rising and their sun is working towards these things. And for me, it just was really like, hey, I don't need that recognition. I don't need those merits. I don't need to everyone to like tell me I'm so great and worthy and smart and all of these things. And like, do you? That's cool, but like it's really interesting because the North Node, which is where we're headed, is you're opening yourself up to understanding your feelings, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and letting go of control. It's like individuals with this placement often find themselves in life situations that give them the opportunity to express themselves freely. And so you
Hmm.
can kind of see how that whole scenario is kind of like pushing me out of the shadows of the South Node and into that North Node.
When you're like completely out of alignment and, this is a way like it comes and goes, right? But, or it's a practice to be in alignment every day. It's a choice we get to make every day. But, I'm thinking about periods of time where we're just totally out of alignment, right? And we are attracting to us, if we're thinking about the law of attraction, we're
Mhm.
attracting to us experiences, people, things that mirror our misalignment. So in the same way of, in the same vein of relationships are our biggest mirrors, that doesn't mean that the relationships are going to mirror back to us and we're going to heal it and everything's going to be great and we're going to be together forever or whatever the things are, right? Like this may be a period of time in your life. This may be a long term. This may be a day. It may be an interaction. But the reality is like these relationships mirror to us opportunities for us to grow. So you get introduced to this person who is really mirroring back to you all of these aspects that are maybe for you showing up as shadow aspects of your South Node that you're like in a place where actually I need to release more of this.
Mhm.
And now I get to see how this actually isn't in my highest good, but it showed me something. It showed me deeper insights into myself. And so we get so many opportunities where we get that reflected back to us. And I just kept thinking of like, yeah, we're magnetizing those people to us. We're drawn to those experiences and those people, or those type of people when we're in those spaces. And it's not a good or bad thing. It just is what it is. And it's learning for us if we're able to, if we so choose to, if we're so fortunate to be able to see that. And so I thought that was really interesting. And then thinking about the shadow aspects, right? Going back to the gold in the shadow, when we can uncover the layers of gold of learning of what are our mistakes that we didn't learn from, what is the unfinished business our soul is still yearning to complete or close out this storyline or whatever it is, um, when we can uncover those, uh, then we start to tap into that like higher frequency of those aspects. So, what are the higher frequencies of Capricorn that now, as you start to become more aware of what aspects aren't working for you? Well, what's the positive? What's the higher frequency, the higher octave of Capricorn South Node that help you propel you towards your soul's purpose? Because there's a lot in there. Because Capricorns can get shit done, and Capricorns, I mean, talk about Libra. I think Capricorns, for me, in my experience with Capricorns, like they are about fairness and they are about putting in the work and the dedication to stay the course. And that's so impressive. And there's so much gold in that that you can now use to support your highest vision and your highest good in this lifetime. And another thing is, um, I've heard the shadow aspects of shadow, right? Like this is the repressed talents, right? Like repressed in our psyche of our talents that we're really good at that can support us. So, like I said, those higher qualities of Capricorn. The other thing is when we're in challenging situations, our South Node, those comfort zone, that's what we retreat back to and challenge. And so, I think about how this shows up for me is like um, you know, not necessarily nothing to do with the ninth house right now, but thinking about Libra qualities when I'm challenged, like I might go into a place where my comfort zone is truly just pure comfort. Like I will stay in whatever feels calm, peaceful, harmony. And sometimes that shows up on a real low octave of frequency. Like that might show up as silent treatment because I'm like, this is how I know how to create some peace and harmony in myself, even though I know that that's not the right kind of peace and harmony that I need for my soul, for my nervous system. But I might retreat to that because I need that space to just be like, "Ugh, nobody talk to me." And that's not helping anyone. But when I'm challenged, that's what we retreat to. So it's so cool to have the awareness of like, and I'm curious, like, how does Capricorn, those lower frequencies, when you're in a challenging situation, and maybe we talked about this too, it's like, how does that show up to you? How do you go rely back on those in challenging moments?
Well, we talked about it in North Node. I think
Yeah.
it comes to that very do, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, something's wrong. What
Totally.
can I do? Because it is, and listen, it served me very well. Like,
Self sacrificing.
and professionally, I've been very successful, and it's interesting to look back too of like being in learning and development, you are front and center. A lot of people know you. You are helping people become better versions of themselves or gain new insights or skill sets to be, do their jobs better and ultimately be better people. And for decades, it's always like, it's never, to me, I actually get uncomfortable with like a lot of recognition. And I know it's so
Mhm.
interesting because of what I do, but what comes up for me is that like that is very organic and natural and I can do it. But I started to see in my mid to late 30s the negative repercussions of just taking those strengths because it looked like overworking. It looked like
Mhm.
doing other people's jobs because I could. Yeah. And also too, if I'll be honest, like, and you're like, why are they getting so much accolades? Like I think there was one time I was like, I basically did that dude's job for him. He just got
Mhm.
promoted. And like I don't need everybody to be like, you're the greatest, but like, how are you getting promoted? And I just basically did your job and made you look really good, and I'm not getting promoted. But again, that goes back to that Libra, right? Which is like assets and
Yeah. It also reminds me of, and my brain is always gonna connect to the different things that we've learned and the different modalities, but I think about just as a nut self theme in human design as frustration, right? Like if that's the way you understand where you're out of alignment or where you're out of balance, for sacral beings, for generators, for manifesting generators like you and I, you're a
are
generator.
you frustration also?
I'm frustration. So when I'm frustrated, it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, something's out of whack, right? So for sure, the other thing you made me think of with the South Node in Libra, for me, my personal placement, South Node in Libra, I just had the aha of like the peace, balance, and justice. Well, maybe not justice, but peace and balance is if I'm challenged or if I'm at the point where I'm just like, oh, forget it, I give up. Whatever anybody else wants to do, I'll just go with the flow. I won't say anything. Like whatever everyone wants to do. And I'm not gonna be bitter about it, but that's not necessarily gonna help me, like, if I'm just letting everything just be like, "Okay, whatever you think," because that's not really in balance. Because it's, like, sacrificing what I want, and, this doesn't show up a ton, but I can see how and maybe specific examples maybe in the past where it has shown up in particular in relationships, and then, you stew about it, and then, months later, you're like, "Well, remember that time when" Go ahead.
Fairness can be subjective
Yep.
also too, which can get
Totally.
dangerous, right? And so you can feel like something's fair, and then in hindsight, it's like, oh, wait, that's
Mhm.
not fair. And that can be that tick, tick, boom. The reason I was so interested to go look and see where my mom's lied is that I also, and again, you've got natal charts, but you also have environment, you have programming, you have a lot of things
So
too
many
that impact
layers.
how you are. And my oldest sister, she's 9 years older than me. So there's quite an age gap. And I just remember like my mom, when I went to college, said, "We'll pay for your first semester of books because we paid for your sister's first semester of
Hmm.
books." And so they really wanted to try and be like fair
Hmm.
always in the household, right? And so I think that that's a little bit of programming just in me as well when it comes to Libra. Not always in a good way, but I
Yeah.
just giggle about that thought of I wonder where Libra falls in my mom's chart because 9 years later to maintain that fairness with your children, right, is just
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Um, well, yeah, totally. Well, and I mean, talk about fair as objective, right? It's like, well, what if fairness to you was like, I don't want you to pay for my books. I want, whatever it is. But anyways, one random thought that's not so random that I had written down was I was listening to something, we were talking about parasites. You're like, where are you coming from with this one?
Mushrooms, parasites, politics. You guys
Where are you coming with this one, Michelle?
anyone want to jump on our phone calls today? No, I trust it's going to go exactly where it
As I'm
needs
on
to
the
go.
brink of doing a parasite cleanse. But the reason I bring this up is because I listened to this podcast. I think it was the founder of the brand Symbiotica. I don't use this brand. I'm just mentioning it because this is who said it. So he's talking about this concept that parasites contain karma. And as he's talking about parasites containing karma, the reason being not just the parasites we take in. I mean, we're our everyday life, right? Like we're exposed to parasites all the time. I have dogs, they walk outside, they come in the bed, all the things, right? So, but the parasites that we inherit, and I think this is random, but it's also relevant to the South Node conversation if we're talking about inheritance. And he talked about parasites containing karma, the parasites that we inherit through our mother and our grandmother, right? Through our DNA. Because as we know, we carry that DNA from our grandmother in the womb, from our mother to us. So that's a whole other topic of like, when we do get into things like ancestral healing or generational trauma and it being in our body through our DNA, this is a fascinating thing to think about is karma being inherited through parasites, first of all, but through everything. But how wild, because if you think about the South Node as containing, whether you believe in reincarnation or not, it doesn't, I don't think it really matters in how you perceive the South Nodes and how you use them. But if we're talking about inherited patterns and habits, because if you remove reincarnation, then we're talking about what did we inherit? Conditioning from our parents, from our grandparents, from our caretakers, from the people around us, from our childhood, right? These are things we inherited from other people. Those are conditioning, programming. And the South Node contains all of that because we're here to learn from it. But it's just really fascinating to think about from a cellular level, from a spiritual level, emotional, energetic, physical. We are truly taking on these patterns, whether they're from our own past lives, they're from inheritance, or whatever it is, or we inherit it from our past selves. And we're bringing it with us. It's just so interesting. And I had to bring that up because it was on my mind because it was just so fresh. I'm literally after our call today, I'm going to bring a bottle to my friend's mom to get a parasite cleanse from her. So all of the things, it's always that way, synchronicities. But I had to mention that really quickly because maybe it'll spark something. I'm sure I'm going to go deep dive into it later too.
And the synchronicities, as you're talking about inheritance, I didn't have this down as like notes for me, but it just so cool how conversations lead back. One thing about Capricorn and Capricorn South Node is they said that these individuals don't tend to get large inheritances passed down from
You're like, well,
family.
thanks a lot.
I was like, truth,
Financial
truth,
inheritances, right?
truth. But then when you make that connection back to my mom and my grandma, my maternal grandmother, from the best of my knowledge, they were very affluent and
Mhm.
well to do. And then, as Russia came in and occupied Latvia, literally, like my grandmother got all of her wealth taken
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
So you think about It does make sense. It's like that ancestral. So it's
1,000%.
like, okay, granddaughter Allie Miller, like, how are you going to deal and like sustain and live life and be of purpose and be whole without inheritance? Or when you lose everything, it's like that continued energy and growth and pattern. So I'm glad you brought that up. It kind of connected some things for me. And again, that's
Yes.
very high level. I don't want to get too into the weeds about it, but it's
No, but I do want to respond to that because if we link to your Cancer North Node, right? And all of the things, what comes up is, yeah, like maybe you're not, there's this like financial aspect of it, but there's also the Cancer of it all of finding belonging, creating your sense of belonging, right? When everything is taken from you physically in the physical world, well, how do you create belonging? And is that the thing that you're constantly moving towards? That's your soul's mission is to really cultivate your own sense of belonging and own sense of wealth on a spiritual, on an emotional, on a like on that belonging theme, and it's such a beautiful thing because, we talk about challenge. Well, not only are you inheriting this narrative, this storyline from your family, from real life experiences, then you inherit it through your DNA, right? Through your grandmother, through your mother, who then had that inherited to you. Then as you go through your life as Allie Miller, you get to then have experiences that are continually mirroring back to you this like continued unfinished business of
yeah.
like, okay, well, now you get to learn. Okay, here you go. Here's your soul contract. And you are going to be put, or a series of events or experiences are going to be put in your path so that you can further help, heal your generational wounding so that you can cultivate your deepest need, which doesn't actually have anything to do with the physical, material wealth that we talk about, but has everything to do with the intangible, deep seated wealth that you can't, that you can, that only comes from within. And that's such a beautiful, cool thing to look at. I think it's so, so, so lovely. I'm going to say one more thing about the South Nodes before we go to practical guidance. And I was going to say this at the end, but I think it's so beautiful. So I read that the original intention, the story of our soul's intention is held in the nodes, right? So our soul's original intention. And we go through, our soul progresses through these series of different lives and experiences and wisdoms until we return to our original oneness of our soul's intention. And I thought that is like such a beautiful, beautiful way to look at all of the shit that we go through in life, good, bad, ugly, all of it, because our soul is like, yes, I'm living out these experiences. I'm helping you evolve and grow wisdom in these areas so that you can come back to your original soul's intention, your original oneness. And then I saw this quote recently from this woman. I don't know, it's an Instagram, so I can't remember who, but she said, I don't change. I just become more myself. And I was like, that is such a beautiful one line of the nodes of everything in astrology, of every healing, of every personal growth modality is we're not doing any of this. We're not uncovering any of this to change who we are. We're doing all this so that we can get back to who we really are underneath all the layers. And it's just so beautiful. And that's all.
I'm like on the verge of crying.
Don't, because then I'll cry. No, you can cry. It's therapeutic. And then I'll cry and we'll release good hormones or good chemicals.
Yeah, it's just like one of those things, like a couple of things I've been really highlighting this year is like my fear of being seen and being seen like
Mm.
authentically.
Hmm.
And as you started talking, I saw myself like numbing myself a little bit because I was just like, as always, just like really moved and felt really seen by your interpretation and acknowledgement of my South and North Node. And I think just like attaching it to the family makes me a little bit more emotional as well, but it
Mm.
just makes you feel like you're on the right path, I guess.
Because you
Yeah.
are, yeah, that's so beautiful. And I always think about this, like how blessed and how fortunate are we that we get to be born into a lifetime where, yes, the world is totally nuts. And also, it's always kind of nuts. And so, how fortunate
Oh,
are
yeah.
we?
We just didn't have access to realizing just
Yeah.
how nuts it was. And they talk about that in the news all the time. It's like, this shit was happening. We just didn't have social media.
It's always happening in different versions. Yeah. And how fortunate are we that we get to be born into this lifetime where we actually get to not only have awareness around these things. I mean, astrology has been around forever, but we couldn't always, like, first of all, it wasn't as accepted, widely accepted. It wasn't used and interpreted by the people, the experts that there are out there now who can interpret it and really make it super accessible for the masses, and then, provide us the
And
variety.
the variety
Yeah.
also of people that might speak to you or that it resonates with you, right? Because it's like
Mhm.
even you, like the way you often, and I know it's very personalized, but
Yeah.
because we know each other so well, but the way you interpret astrology really resonates with me hardcore.
Yeah.
And some astrologers are just like, meh. So again, you're so lucky to have access to, and you're not an astrologer, obviously, but you understand it enough.
I might be one day. No, but it's true. Like, I think I was talking. I think this conversation has come up 1,000 times in my life, but um, we once started talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how as you move up the hierarchy. But I always look at it generationally when the conversation. Oh, this is why I brought up the parent talks before, was because I think about how generationally, like my grandmother, there was self-discovery. What the hell are you talking about? No, you get married and you have kids, and maybe if it allows, you have a job and take care of your family and be all of those things. Um and that's our experience, but I think collectively there's a little bit of that happening with a lot of people can resonate. Then my mom, like next generation, my mom was like, they went the opposite direction. Like, I want to have a career. I want to be independent. I want to put my career first because that was the way that you just so then you get to the next generation, we get to move the needle along because now we get to say like, oh, well, who am I? And what does it mean to be human? Or we get to have a podcast where we talk about astrology. And, I think how just I always think about when things are absolutely chaotic and when the world feels really scary, I'm like, and also I get to be a 38-year-old woman who gets to have a podcast and talk about astrology and use those learnings and learn about it so that I can learn about myself, so that I can have, so that I can further connect with what it feels to be, satisfied and fulfilled and joyful. And maybe even I don't reach that 100% point in my life. Who knows, right? Who does? But the fact that I get to do these things. I get to wake up and meditate, and I don't have to be a monk and go travel all over the world. I get to wake up and do these things because, like this is the time frame in which I was born. And so I think it's really beautiful. It helps me anyways really look at the frustrations and the challenges and the pain of all of the life experiences with such a fresh, not fresh, but just like a more accepting perspective. uh,
And like a
yeah, it's just
well-rounded,
such a cool
yeah,
thing.
it's just a different.
Rounded.
Well, we could
Yeah,
go off on a tangent, I know
we can
forever. I
go
think there
off.
were some really beautiful ahas in there and like full circle
Mhm.
moments. And I'm wondering your thoughts because you had brought up how to incorporate, right? So we've got this, but it's a lunar eclipse in
This is a solar eclipse.
solar eclipse.
New moon. It's a new moon. And I think we should definitely do a moon episode, even though there's tons of information, but it's a good conversation to just talk about the different phases of the moon and what they kind of signify. But new moons are, you know, generally speaking, about new intentions, new narrative, or new storylines. And,
Okay, universe, I hear you. Remember
I
that
hear
the
you.
psychic reader was like, you need to learn about the moon cycles. I hear you, universe. Okay.
Gosh, I mean, and there's just, again, talk about the time we live in. There are beautiful resources. I love a good planner because I love to handwrite. I was the Hello Kitty Sanrio kid that just like lived for the, scented stationery. So, of course, as an adult, I still love a good planner. I love, I have the Astro Planner from Channing Nicholas this year, but my personal favorite is the Magic of Eye Planner, which gives you all the lunar transits of the year. And it's such a beautiful, mystical, magical planner that really marries for me like the woo and the practical in such a cool way. So, plug for Magic of Eye. But, anyways, are we
So
talking about
just
kind of
like
a
self-care rituals
practical?
or like
Hmm.
practical tips for trying. So I guess I was just trying to word my question appropriately and like the solar eclipse in Libra and then just our south nodes. Like how do we
Yeah.
start to I think you've heard real time, like how we have just an understanding, learning more about it has deepened at least my awareness of
Yeah.
my trajectory and my path and purpose. But what might
Talking about it,
be
right? Like all the insights that happen when we just get to process. But I think, um, well, if all you do is get curious and let, the insights come up like they have for us in this conversation, that in itself is a really great bit of advice.
yeah.
It's like, just like go dig around in your chart, look at your nodes, see what resonates. And if something doesn't resonate, that's okay too. Don't focus on it. So that's like the first thing I think is really helpful.
And these days, it's just
Um,
really easy to Google, like, North Node Cancer, South Node Capricorn. And not that there's like an
Mhm.
extensive, but there is enough stuff that is accurate to start to get a sense and interpret. And then you
Absolutely.
had baths and releasing energies you had put
Mhm.
in there. So is this like,
I did.
yeah, like
Hair rituals.
staging, clearing energy? What made you feel called to put that on these types of things on the list for
So, oh yeah. Well, for practical guidance, I thought self-care rituals just as a broad category, and that could mean a lot of different things, but a lot of times people will do like writing a release letter to yourself. What are those patterns? If you're going to process them, maybe consider writing it down, whether it's journaling. And if you want to have more of a ritual around it, then you can certainly safely burn, or you can, throw out this letter as a gesture of really releasing and letting go. So that's one ritual you can practice. And the bath, yeah, I think water is such a powerful conduit. I mean, it'll come up, whether it's in sound healing or in these ritual baths, or,
always I
I
listened
was
to
on.
Kabbalah where I'm getting more
Mhm.
into Kabbalah and it's in the shower. It's just like a mantra you can
Yes,
say about like clearing your energies. And I forget exactly what it is now. I'll go back and look. But yeah,
water
even
is
just
so purifying and cleansing. And so, whether you want to take a bath or you want to have this kind of ritual shower, I know that even just washing your hands of something. This is something I used to do when I worked in beauty and I had, big teams of people, and everything felt like an emergency, or there was just high drama, or people were arguing, or I felt like my energy was just being like drained throughout the day. By the end of 8.5 hours, I'm like depleted of, emotionally, energetically. And so I would do these like midday, like a really good like scrub. I mean, I worked in a beauty department, so I was surrounded by luxury scrubs.
yeah.
So, go to the sink in the apothecary and really scrub. But like, yeah, it's a physical gesture, it's a symbolic gesture, but as you're doing it intentionally, like really just cleansing and parsing out what's not yours, what emotions, what energetics have you kind of like have latched onto you, or that you have held on to, and
And
really letting them wash down the drain.
that's always, but
Mhm.
especially during eclipse season, right? Because energies are so high, of being mindful of the energies
Yeah.
we're taking on or how energies are coming up for us. And again, I think that that's why your suggestions on just like energy clearing and water are so impactful. I mean, always,
Absolutely.
but especially during eclipse season time.
Yeah, we can learn so much from them. And I think I had another note that wasn't necessarily self care, but it kind of is. All of these are self care, but if you are, if you're a person who wants to journal a little bit more, then start. Maybe it's a good time to really start to journal on your relationships. Right? We're talking about the Libra eclipse, and so what are the themes of Libra? Like, where in your relationships might you need to establish or identify some boundaries to help you stay in balance? And I mean, like, truly your interpretation of that.
Mm.
So, whether it's a boundary with yourself about, finding balance. Where does this land for you? If maybe it's in your daily life, or maybe it is a communication boundary in relationships. And so giving yourself the time to kind of journal on that and process. I think about in coaching, sometimes you may actually like, I think we've heard this example before too. It's like you might be working with someone on how to set boundaries, and multiple conversations might just be you processing, reflecting on the boundary that needs to be set, identifying it, and maybe rehearsing what it sounds like,
Mhm.
even though it may go totally different. But so much preparation and processing and thoughtfulness can go into that before you actually set the verbal, or that boundary. And so give yourself that time and patience to let those things come up for you. What is it, and how do you want to approach it, and how comfortable or confident do you feel approaching it? Because, again, like, I don't think it's a time to force yourself into setting these boundaries, but maybe it's a time to reflect on what those look like and what needs to happen when you're ready.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's really important because as I touched on again, just knowing that like my do nature, I can get very like, okay,
Mhm.
eclipse season is coming up. Here's these boundaries. Here, let me set this here, here, here. And it's such a valid point because sometimes our souls may not be ready to take that big of a leap. And just being aware and journaling on it, or having conversations and getting interested about it is literally enough. And if
Yeah.
you don't, then you're at that place, and that's enough too, right? You were talking about earlier, Michelle, like this body of work will find you when it's meant to find you, for sure.
That's exactly it. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Let's get into our self love check in, if cool.
Yeah.
So we'll start with you, Michelle. In what ways can letting go of old narratives, so really leaning into this Libra theme, right, in the solar eclipse, like in what ways can letting go of old narratives about balance and fairness deepen your self love?
Think this is a recurring theme in relationships or in relationship for me, in particular in my romantic relationship with the only other with my husband.
I know. I was like, "Are you
Um,
going to see your romantic relationships?" I was like, "Do
um,
no judgment, but do I need to know about expansion?"
But I do think that these old storylines or narratives of what balance actually means, it's constantly playing out because, we've talked about this at length. It's like as my life has shifted over the last several years, I went from, being out of the house all the time and working in a really busy environment and like really feeling super independent and like just totally in a different world, to then shifting to being at home a lot more. And he's now out all the time, working, and he's doing all of these different things. And so our dynamic and what balance and what feels fair in our relationship has to evolve, and has evolved over the last several years. But it hasn't been this like, sweet and dandy, happy evolution of like, yeah, we just everything fell into place. No, like it's a lot of mentally and emotionally rewiring my brain to be like, okay, I contribute in these ways. I bring things to the table that look a little bit different than I did before, and it's still enough. Um, I think that part is really a necessary reminder. And when I think about deepening self love, yeah, it's like I'm showing myself that that I, don't only contribute or provide validation in my relationship in one way. And that can look, and I can spend a long time exploring all the different ways. And that's kind of the beauty of relationships too, is like, getting to uncover different parts of myself that maybe I wasn't showing up as, because I didn't need to.
Yeah.
And now dynamics have shifted, things are changed. And so I get to explore that and kind of fall in love with myself and my relationship and my life now all over again. Yeah. How about you?
Well, I think ways letting go of old narratives. I mean, this has been a hot topic for me as soon as I figured this narrative out about myself, of which will not be foreign to you of that, thinking about balance and fairness of the best way to say it is like never feeling like always feeling like others have it worse off or their problems are harder or like they need more help than I'll ever need. And I think what I've really realized in growth and then continuing to have these conversations and like specifically looking at the shadowy aspects of the Capricorn and what that means in South Node and Cancer and North Node is just having a balance of looking out for fairness. And right, like my strongest gift in human design is community and creating win-win scenarios for the collective. So it's always kind of a theme for me of like, that's not fair. This needs to be fair. When I was a leader, I was always behind the scenes of like, no, you need to get their pay equal,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
not
yeah.
concerned about my own pay because I was severely underpaid. You know what I mean? And I think it's just being more mindful of that. I can tend to gaslight myself and on the fairness of things and just be very steamrolled as soon as somebody can push back. And, balances feel very off that way. And just really being mindful of, while this is a big aha and it's something on my mind, of wanting to make sure that I'm staying in alignment with my values and when I take a stand for myself and being fair, because you could also like lean the opposite way. And while I don't feel strongly concerned because got 42 years of knowing that I care deeply about people and put them in the highest regards and almost like lean opposite of like their well-being over my well-being. I just really am going to be mindful on keeping those balanced scales and more so like bringing my balance scale up a little bit more of I'm worthy, that's fair, and that all feels like that self-love, like helping me to just understand that I'm worthy of having equality in certain areas and I'm worthy of sticking up for myself and creating fairness in my relationships and my projects and my life and all things. So that's what I kind of think about.
Sounds like your personal karma in in human design of trusting that service to yourself is being in service to others. Actually, putting yourself first is not selfish whatsoever. Even in the Tess episode, she said, "That's not selfish, Allie. That's not selfish." And what a cool reflection in so many different ways. This has been a really awesome conversation. And I hope that if anyone takes away from this, well, there's lots of things. But I think the most important is really thinking about this eclipse season as an opportunity to just really reflect on whatever is coming up for you. And around this October 2nd eclipse, what is coming up for you around themes of balance and harmony in your life, fairness, and, in regard to your relationships, where are we looking for external validation? And where are we maybe people pleasing or self sacrificing our needs? And let that be, something to reflect on, and considering eclipse season how to's, get plenty of rest, drink lots of water, do the things that ground you, whether it's meditating or putting your feet in the grass, but give yourself space to just let the insights come up for you so that you can learn from them and start to use those learnings and towards your highest good and towards your soul's purpose.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and listening. Until next time, be blessed.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. If you resonated with what you heard today, join us in this vibrant community of seekers, dreamers, and creators. Find us on Instagram at Karmic Mirror Podcast and stay connected with us for additional content, updates, and more. We love hearing from our community and engaging in conversations.
You can catch all our episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts, so make sure to subscribe. And if you really love what you're hearing, we'd be so grateful if you would leave us a 5-star review or share with someone who might benefit from our content. Your feedback means the world to us.
As we bid you farewell, we encourage you to embrace the ever-unfolding story of your life. Life's too short for a one-size-fits-all approach. Remember, your path to flourishing is uniquely yours.
Until next time on the Karmic Mirror, stay true, stay curious, and always be kind to yourself.